My name is Ruby, and I'm 56 years old. 3 weeks ago, I watched my beautiful daughter Sarah marry Derek in what I thought was a fairy tale wedding. What Derek didn't know was that 2 months before their ceremony, my Uncle Henry passed away and left me $8 million. I deliberately kept this inheritance secret, wanting to see if Derek truly loved Sarah for who she was, not what our family might be worth. But 3 days after their wedding, Derek showed up at my door with demands that revealed his true character. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know where you're watching from around the world. Please drop your location in the comments below and hit that like button to help more people discover this channel. Make sure to subscribe with notifications on because you won't believe what Derek tried to pull next. Can you guess what his real intentions were all along? Let's find out together what happens when greed meets the wrong family. To understand how everything unraveled so quickly, I need to take you back to where this all began. 12 years ago, when my husband died unexpectedly from a heart attack, Sarah was just 16 years old. Suddenly, I found myself a single mother, working as a registered nurse at St. Mary's Hospital to keep us afloat financially. Those years were incredibly challenging, often working double shifts just to pay the bills and keep Sarah in school. But we managed to build a strong, loving relationship through all the struggles. Uncle Henry was my father's youngest brother, a brilliant man who had built a successful construction and real estate business over 40 years. Despite his considerable wealth, Henry lived extremely modestly in a tiny two-bedroom house on Maple Street, driving the same Ford pickup truck he'd owned for 23 years. He shopped at discount stores, clipped coupons religiously, and you'd never guess he was worth millions just by looking at his lifestyle. Henry spent every major holiday with Sarah and me, becoming the grandfather figure Sarah had lost when my father passed away years earlier. Henry's sudden death last October came as a complete shock to everyone who knew him. At 68, he appeared to be in perfect health, still working construction projects and maintaining his rental properties personally. When he suffered a massive heart attack while inspecting a roof repair, the doctors said he died almost instantly. The funeral was small, but filled with people whose lives Henry had touched through his quiet generosity over the decades. The reading of Henry's will 2 weeks later left me speechless. His attorney, Mrs. Patterson, had been trying to reach me for days before I finally returned her calls. When she told me Henry had left his entire estate to me, including $8.2 million in cash stocks and real estate holdings, I actually thought she was calling the wrong person. Henry had never mentioned having substantial wealth, and I had no idea he'd been building this fortune for decades through careful investments and property acquisitions. Mrs. Patterson explained that Henry had been living off just his construction income, while letting his investments compound year after year. He owned 14 rental properties throughout the city, maintained a diversified stock portfolio worth over $3 million, and had nearly $2 million in various savings accounts. The inheritance also included his business equipment tools and the small house where he'd lived so frugally for so many years. My first instinct was to call Sarah immediately and share this incredible news. But something made me hesitate. She had just gotten engaged to Derek Martinez, a 29-year-old loan officer at First National Bank downtown. They'd been dating for almost 2 years, and Sarah seemed genuinely happy with him. Derek appeared to be a decent, hard-working man who treated my daughter with respect and kindness. During their courtship, Derek had impressed me with his thoughtfulness and maturity. He always brought flowers when visiting our home, remembered important dates like Sarah's birthday and our anniversary of my husband's death, and spoke about their future together with genuine enthusiasm. He worked steadily at the bank, lived within his means, and never displayed any signs of being materialistic or money-focused. When he asked for my blessing to marry Sarah, his speech was heartfelt and focused entirely on his love for her character and personality. The engagement period lasted 8 months, during which Derek and Sarah seemed blissfully happy together. They found a small apartment near downtown, started planning their future, and included me in all their major decisions. Derek was always respectful toward me, calling me Mrs. Morrison and asking for my advice on everything from wedding venues to career decisions. He seemed to genuinely value family relationships and often mentioned how important it was to him that Sarah and I were so close. Wedding planning brought out the best in everyone involved. Derek's parents were lovely people who welcomed Sarah warmly into their family. His mother Maria and I worked together on decorations, while his father Carlos helped with logistical arrangements. As a nurse, my contribution was necessarily modest, but I managed to cover the flowers, part of the catering costs, and Sarah's wedding dress alterations. Derek never questioned my ability to help financially, seeming to assume I'd been saving carefully for this day. The wedding itself was absolutely beautiful. 80 guests gathered at Riverside Chapel on a perfect October afternoon, exactly 1 year after Uncle Henry's passing. Sarah looked radiant in her grandmother's modified wedding dress, and Derek couldn't take his eyes off her during the entire ceremony. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other forever, I felt such overwhelming joy watching my daughter begin this new chapter of her life. During the reception, Derek was the perfect gentleman, dancing with Sarah, thanking guests personally, and making sure everyone felt included in the celebration. He gave a toast that brought tears to my eyes, talking about how blessed he felt to have found Sarah, and how grateful he was to become part of our family. Several guests commented on what a wonderful couple they made, and how obvious their love was to everyone present. That night, as I cleaned up the reception hall with help from both families, I remember feeling so grateful that Sarah had found such a good man. Derek stayed until the very end, helping stack chairs and load decorations into cars despite wearing his best suit. He hugged me goodbye that evening, calling me Mum for the first time, and promising to take good care of Sarah forever. I went to bed that night, planning to tell them about Uncle Henry's inheritance in a few weeks perhaps, as a surprise housewarming gift when they started looking for their first house. I imagined how excited they'd be to learn they could afford something much nicer than they'd been planning. I pictured Sarah's face when she realized she could quit her stressful job at the insurance company if she wanted to pursue her dream of becoming a teacher. I fell asleep feeling incredibly blessed and optimistic about everyone's future. The first crack in this perfect picture appeared at 2:37 in the morning, just 1 day after the wedding. My phone's shrill ring jerked me from deep sleep, and Sarah's name on the caller ID immediately sent alarm bells through my entire system. No one calls their mother at that hour unless something is seriously wrong. "Mum!" Sarah's voice was barely audible, shaky and filled with an emotion I couldn't immediately identify. "I'm sorry for calling so late, but I really need to talk to someone right now." I sat up instantly, my maternal instincts firing on all cylinders. "Sweetheart, what's happening? Are you hurt? Is Derek okay?" My mind immediately jumped to car accidents, medical emergencies, or some other crisis that might have befallen the newlyweds. "We're both fine physically," Sarah said, and I could hear her moving around, probably trying to find a private place to talk. "But Mom, Derek is acting completely different. It's like he became a totally different person the moment we got back to the apartment last night." Sarah's voice dropped even lower, and I realized she was trying to avoid being overheard. She explained how Derek had immediately begun going through her personal belongings the moment they arrived home from their wedding night hotel. He'd emptied her purse completely, examining every receipt, business card, and piece of paper. He'd gone through her phone contacts, questioning her about friends I'd never heard him express concern about before. "He made me delete phone numbers, Mum. People I've known for years. He said now that we're married, I need to focus on our relationship and cut out distractions." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. When I asked him what he meant by distractions, He said anyone who might give me ideas about spending money or pursuing goals that don't benefit our marriage. The controlling behavior had escalated throughout their first day as a married couple. Derek had insisted on going through Sarah's bank statements from the past year, questioning every expenditure and demanding explanations for purchases she considered completely normal. He'd been particularly focused on any money I'd given her, including birthday gifts, Christmas presents, and help with wedding expenses. He keeps asking how you afforded to help with the wedding, Sarah continued. He wants to know exactly how much money you make as a nurse, how much you spend on rent and groceries, and how you manage to save enough to contribute to our wedding costs. When I told him you've always been careful with money, he got this strange look and said careful wasn't enough to explain it. But the most disturbing part of Sarah's call was Derek's sudden, intense interest in Uncle Henry. During the wedding reception, several relatives had shared fond memories of Henry, mentioning how generous he'd always been and how much he'd meant to our family. Derek had apparently been listening much more carefully than I'd realized. Derek spent an hour tonight asking me detailed questions about Uncle Henry's funeral, Sarah whispered. He wanted to know who attended, whether Henry had a large estate, and if he left anything significant to family members. When I said I didn't know much about Henry's finances, Derek got irritated and said I should pay more attention to important family matters. Sarah described how Derek had become increasingly agitated as the evening progressed, pacing around their apartment and muttering about family secrets and hidden assets. He'd accused her of being naive about money matters and suggested that both of us were keeping financial information from him that he had a right to know as her husband. The scariest part, Sarah admitted, is how his whole personality changed. During our entire relationship, Derek was always so calm and patient, but tonight he was aggressive, suspicious, and demanding. It's like the man I married disappeared the moment we signed the marriage certificate. I spent the rest of that call trying to reassure Sarah while fighting my own growing sense of dread. I suggested that maybe Derek was just stressed about taking on the financial responsibilities of marriage, or perhaps he was worried about being able to provide for their future together. Many couples experience adjustment difficulties during major life transitions, I told her. But deep in my heart, I was beginning to suspect that Derek's behavior change wasn't about normal newlywed stress. His focus on family finances and Uncle Henry seemed too specific, too calculated to be coincidental. I went back to bed that night with a sick feeling in my stomach, wondering if I'd completely misjudged the man my daughter had just married. The second day brought even more disturbing reports from Sarah. Derek had taken control of her bank cards and credit cards, claiming he needed to organize their joint finances as a married couple. He'd spent the entire morning going through 2 years' worth of bank statements, creating spreadsheets of her spending patterns and questioning every transaction over $50. Sarah called me from work during her lunch break, speaking quickly and quietly to avoid being overheard by her co-workers. "Mom, he's obsessed with figuring out our family's money situation. He calculated exactly how much my job pays after taxes, then compared it to my spending patterns, and concluded I must be receiving regular financial help from you." Derek's interrogation had become systematic and relentless. He'd demanded to see every piece of jewelry Sarah owned, examining each item to determine its value and origin. He'd been particularly interested in the pearl necklace that had belonged to my grandmother, asking detailed questions about other family heirlooms that might exist. "He went through my hope chest this morning," Sarah continued, "looking at everything my grandmother left me. He kept asking if there were other relatives who might have left valuable items to our family over the years. When I mentioned some antique furniture in your house, his eyes lit up in a way that really frightened me." The most chilling development was Derek's research into Uncle Henry's background. Using his access to banking databases, Derek had apparently been looking into Henry's financial history and property ownership records. Sarah discovered this when she found printed pages of public property records scattered on their dining room table. Derek knows about Henry's rental properties, Sarah said, her voice tight with anxiety. He found records showing Henry owned buildings throughout downtown. When I asked why he was researching my dead uncle, he said married couples shouldn't have financial secrets from each other. Derek's behavior towards Sarah had become increasingly controlling throughout the day. He'd called her office twice to check on her whereabouts and had demanded she come straight home after work without stopping anywhere else. He'd also made disturbing comments about her friendships, suggesting she should distance herself from anyone who might interfere with their marriage. "I feel like I'm living with a stranger," Sarah admitted near the end of our conversation. "The Derek I fell in love with never showed any signs of being this suspicious, controlling, or money-focused. I keep waiting for him to snap out of it and become himself again, but it's getting worse instead of better." That afternoon, I made a decision that would prove crucial in the days ahead. I called Mrs. Patterson, Uncle Henry's attorney, and asked her to prepare documentation of the inheritance along with legal protections in case the situation with Derek escalated further. Something in my gut told me this wasn't going to end with a simple conversation about trust and communication. The third morning shattered any remaining illusions I had about Derek's character. At 8:45, my doorbell rang insistently, and I found Derek standing on my porch with an expression I'd never seen before. Gone was any pretense of the respectful, polite son-in-law who had asked for my blessing just months earlier. In his place stood someone cold, calculating and barely containing aggressive energy beneath a thin veneer of civility. "We need to have a conversation, Ruby," Derek said, not waiting for an invitation before pushing past me into my living room. The use of my first name, delivered in such a demanding tone, immediately set me on edge. Throughout our entire relationship, he'd always called me Mrs. Morrison or asked permission before entering my home. Derek's behavior once inside was even more unsettling. His eyes swept through my modest living room, like a predator assessing territory, taking inventory of everything from my furniture to the family photographs on the mantelpiece. He picked up items without asking permission, examined the frames of Henry's photographs, and even opened the drawer of my side table, as if he had every right to explore my personal belongings. "I've been doing some thinking about your financial situation." Derek began settling into my favorite armchair without being invited to sit. His tone was conversational, but there was an underlying edge that made my skin crawl. "As Sarah's husband, I have a responsibility to understand our family's complete financial picture." Derek pulled out a small notebook filled with what appeared to be calculations and research notes. "Registered nurses in this area typically earn between $55,000 and $65,000 per year," he continued reading from his notes. "After taxes, insurance, and normal living expenses, that leaves very little room for saving significant amounts of money." I tried to maintain my composure, explaining that I'd always been extremely careful with money lived below my means and saved diligently throughout Sarah's childhood. Derek's response was a cold laugh that sent shivers down my spine. "Cut the act, Ruby. I work in banking. Remember, I understand cash flow, debt-to-income ratios, and savings patterns better than most people." Derek leaned forward in my chair, his eyes narrowing with an intensity that made me step backward involuntarily. "Your contribution to Sarah's wedding plus maintaining this house and supporting her through college doesn't add up mathematically." Derek's notebook contained detailed research he'd conducted about our family, including property records, obituary information about Uncle Henry, and even details about my employment history at the hospital. The depth of his investigation was both impressive and terrifying. Henry Morrison owned 12 rental properties in the downtown district. Derek read from his notes. Public records show he purchased most of these buildings over a 20-year period, paying cash for several of them. A man doesn't accumulate that kind of real estate portfolio by accident. When I insisted that I didn't know the details of Uncle Henry's business affairs, Derek's facade began to crack more visibly. He stood up from my chair with sudden aggression, towering over me in a way that felt deliberately intimidating. "Don't insult my intelligence," Derek said, his voice rising slightly. "Generous elderly relatives don't just disappear without leaving generous inheritances. Henry Morrison died 2 months before Sarah and I got married, and suddenly you have extra money to contribute to our wedding. That's not a coincidence." Derek began pacing around my living room, touching my belongings with increasing boldness. He examined the antique lamp that had belonged to my grandmother, picked up the jewelry box on my dresser, and even looked behind picture frames as if searching for hidden documents. "I'm going to ask you one more time, and I suggest you think carefully before answering," Derek said, stopping directly in front of me with his arms crossed. "What did Henry Morrison leave you, and where is that inheritance right now?" When I continued to insist there was nothing significant to discuss, Derek's mask fell away completely. His face flushed red with anger, and he slammed his fist down on my coffee table hard enough to make the glass top rattle. "You're lying to me, and you're lying to Sarah," Derek shouted. "I've done my homework. Henry Morrison was worth millions, and that money went somewhere when he died. As Sarah's husband, I have legal rights to know about family assets that could affect our future." Derek's threats became more explicit as his anger escalated. He suggested that my relationship with Sarah could become very complicated if I didn't start cooperating with what he called legitimate financial planning. He implied that married couples who don't trust their spouses' families often end up isolated and divorced. "Sarah is my wife now," Derek said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "That means your family secrets become my business too. I suggest you start thinking about what kind of relationship you want to have with your daughter going forward." Before leaving my house, Derek made it crystal clear this confrontation was only the beginning. He promised to return the following day with more specific questions and expected honest answers about what I was hiding from him and Sarah. "I know you have Henry's inheritance," Derek said from my doorway, his smile completely devoid of warmth. "Tomorrow we're going to discuss exactly how much it is and how it's going to be distributed within this family. I hope for everyone's sake that you'll be more cooperative." After Derek left, I sat in my living room shaking uncontrollably. This wasn't about money. It was about power control and manipulation. Derek had revealed himself as someone capable of threats and intimidation, and my daughter was trapped in a marriage with this predator. I realized that my decision to hide the inheritance hadn't been about protecting Derek from temptation. It had been about protecting Sarah from discovering his true character after it was too late to escape. The explosion I'd been dreading came that evening with devastating force. At 6:23, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Mom, this is Sarah using neighbor's phone. Derek locked me in an apartment and took my phone. He's destroying everything looking for papers about Uncle Henry. Please help me." I grabbed my car keys and drove to their apartment faster than I'd ever driven in my life, my hands trembling on the steering wheel as worst-case scenarios flashed through my mind. What I discovered when I arrived was beyond anything I could have imagined in my darkest nightmares. The apartment that had been their honeymoon sanctuary just 3 days earlier looked like a tornado had torn through it. Derek had transformed their living space into a disaster zone of overturned furniture, scattered papers, and destroyed personal belongings. Books were thrown everywhere, couch cushions were slashed open, and Sarah's hope chest had been completely emptied, its contents strewn across the floor. Sarah was huddled in the corner of their bedroom, tears streaming down her face, surrounded by the remnants of what had been her most treasured possessions. Photographs were torn from frames. Letters from college friends were scattered and crumpled, and her jewelry box had been smashed open with what appeared to be a hammer. "Where is it?" Derek screamed when he saw me enter the apartment. His appearance was shocking. Hair disheveled, shirt torn, eyes wild with a combination of rage and desperation. Where are the inheritance documents? The bank statements? The property deeds? I know that old man left you millions. Derek was holding a crowbar, apparently having used it to pry open every locked drawer cabinet and container in the apartment. Sarah's antique writing desk, a gift from my grandmother, had been completely destroyed. Its locked compartments smashed open and searched. "Derek, what are you doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm while moving slowly towards Sarah. "This isn't how people solve problems. You're scaring Sarah and destroying your own home." Derek whirled around to face me, brandishing the crowbar in a way that made me freeze in place. "Don't pretend you don't know exactly why I'm doing this. Your daughter has been lying to me about her family's financial situation, and you've been coaching her to keep secrets from her own husband." Sarah looked at me with such confusion and terror that my heart broke completely. "Mum, I don't understand what's happening. What inheritance is he talking about? Uncle Henry left you money. How much money?" The pain in Sarah's voice cut through me like a knife. Here was my daughter trapped between her mother's protective deception and her husband's violent greed, not understanding how she'd become the center of such a devastating conflict. Derek's response to Sarah's question was to grab her roughly by the arm, jerking her to her feet with enough force to make her cry out in pain. "Your mother has been playing games with both of us, Sarah. Uncle Henry didn't just leave her a few sentimental keepsakes. I did research today. He was worth over $8 million. The number hit Sarah like a physical blow. She stared at me in shock, her face cycling through confusion, hurt, and disbelief. $8 million, Mum, is that true? You've had $8 million this whole time and never told me." Derek's grip tightened on Sarah's arm as he used her pain to fuel his own rage. "That's right, sweetheart. Your loving mother has been sitting on a fortune while watching us stress about apartment rent and wedding expenses. While you've been working overtime at that insurance company, she's been hiding enough money to set us up for life." "Even if that's true," Sarah said quietly, trying to pull away from Derek's grasp, "this isn't how someone who loves me would handle it. You've destroyed our home, threatened my mother, and you're hurting me right now. Who are you?" Derek's answer was to shove Sarah back against the wall with enough force to make her head snap back. "I'm your husband. That means what's hers becomes ours eventually. I spent 2 years investing in this relationship, planning our future together, and I'm not going to let some secretive old woman cheat me out of what I deserve." The word deserve hit me like lightning. Derek wasn't talking about love or marriage or building a future with Sarah. He was talking about return on investment, about a 2-year con game that was finally paying off. Sarah had never been a person to him. She'd been a long-term business strategy, a way to access what he'd suspected was family wealth. When I tried to step towards Sarah to check if she was injured, Derek moved to block me, raising the crowbar in a threatening gesture. "Don't even think about interfering, old woman. We're going to settle this tonight one way or another." "Settle what?" I demanded, my fear for Sarah overriding my own safety concerns. "What exactly do you think you're going to accomplish by terrorizing your wife and destroying your own apartment?" Derek's laugh was completely devoid of humor. "I'm going to get what I married into this family to find. Sarah isn't going anywhere until you hand over those inheritance documents and we work out a fair distribution of Henry's assets." "A fair distribution," Sarah echoed, staring at Derek as if seeing him for the first time. "Derek, Uncle Henry wasn't even your relative. You never met him. You have no claim to anything he left to my mother." Derek's response was swift and vicious. He backhanded Sarah across the face, hard enough to leave a red mark on her cheek, then grabbed her by both shoulders and shook her violently. "I have every claim. You're my wife. Your family's money is my money. That 8 million belongs to our future together. Derek's voice had become completely unhinged spittle flying from his mouth as he screamed. In that moment, watching my daughter's terror and Derek's complete loss of control, something fundamental shifted inside me. The frightened, defensive woman Derek thought he was intimidating suddenly ceased to exist, replaced by someone he had never encountered before and was completely unprepared to handle. I straightened up from where I'd been cowering and looked Derek directly in the eyes. My fear replaced by something he'd never seen before, the calm, steady gaze of someone who had just decided to stop playing defense and start playing offense. You want to know about money, Derek? I said quietly, pulling my phone from my purse with deliberate slowness. Let me show you exactly what kind of money you're dealing with, and exactly what kind of woman you just threatened. Derek's triumphant expression began to falter as I scrolled through my contacts and dialed a number he couldn't see. Patricia, this is Ruby Morrison. I need you to activate the emergency protocol we discussed. Yes, tonight. Bring everything. The change in Derek's face was immediate and dramatic. The confidence that had fueled his rage began to drain away as he realized his victim wasn't following the script he'd expected. Sarah, your Uncle Henry left me $8.2 million, 6 rental properties downtown, and a diversified investment portfolio worth another $2 million. I kept my voice steady and matter-of-fact, while watching Derek's face go pale. I kept it secret because I wanted to make sure Derek loved you for yourself, not for access to family wealth. Derek's mouth opened and closed wordlessly as the full scope of what he'd been chasing finally became clear. $10 million, he whispered, his grip on the crowbar loosening slightly. That's right. $10 million that you'll never see a single penny of. I continued, my voice gaining strength. But here's what you didn't research carefully enough, Derek. I didn't just inherit Uncle Henry's money. I inherited his business network, his legal connections, and his very expensive team of attorneys. I held up my phone, showing Derek the recording app that had been running since I'd entered the apartment. I've recorded everything you've said and done tonight. The threats, the violence against Sarah, the destruction of property, and your very explicit extortion demands. Derek lunged toward my phone, but I was ready for him. I stepped back smoothly and smiled. Too late. Everything's already uploaded to secure cloud storage and sent to my legal team. Patricia has connections throughout the police department, district attorney's office, and family court system. The sound of approaching sirens in the distance made Derek's remaining color disappear completely. You called the police? I called everyone, I replied calmly. Police attorneys, private investigators, and a security company that specializes in domestic violence protection. By tomorrow morning, you'll be facing criminal charges, divorce proceedings, and a restraining order that will keep you away from Sarah permanently. Derek's bravado crumbled as he realized he'd walked directly into a trap of his own making. The crowbar clattered to the floor as police lights began illuminating the apartment windows. You see, Derek, you made a crucial mistake in your research. I continued, moving to stand beside Sarah. You assumed I was just a naive nurse who'd stumbled into some inheritance money. You never bothered to find out that I've been working in emergency medicine for 30 years, that I've dealt with violent men like you hundreds of times, and that Uncle Henry specifically chose me as his heir because he knew I'd be strong enough to protect his legacy. Sarah moved closer to me, her choice becoming clear as Derek's true nature was finally fully exposed. Derek, I want you to listen carefully, she said, her voice stronger than it had been all evening. I don't care if my mother has $10 or $10 million. The way you've behaved tonight has shown me exactly who you really are, and I want nothing to do with that person. Derek tried one last desperate appeal as police officers began climbing the stairs to the apartment. Sarah, think about our future. Think about the life we could have with that kind of money. Everything I did tonight was for us. No, Sarah replied firmly. Everything you did tonight was for yourself. A man who truly loved me would never destroy my possessions, threaten my mother, or hit me in the face. You never loved me, Derek. You loved what you thought I could give you access to. As the police reached our door, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Derek had revealed his true character in the most dramatic way possible, and now he would face the full consequences of his choices. The inheritance he'd been so desperately seeking would be used to ensure he could never hurt Sarah or anyone else again. The legal machinery that Uncle Henry's inheritance had provided access to moved with impressive speed and efficiency. Within 48 hours of Derek's arrest, he was facing multiple felony charges, including domestic violence, extortion, destruction of property, criminal threatening, and attempted coercion of a vulnerable person. Patricia, our attorney, worked closely with the district attorney's office to ensure Derek understood the full scope of what he was facing. The recording I'd made that night, combined with the physical evidence of the destroyed apartment and Sarah's injuries, created an airtight case that even Derek's overworked public defender advised him not to fight. The divorce proceedings began immediately, with Patricia filing an emergency petition that cited domestic violence and irreconcilable differences. Derek's banking career ended abruptly when his employer learned about the arrest. Financial institutions cannot retain employees who've been charged with extortion and threats of violence, regardless of the circumstances. Derek's attempt to claim any portion of Uncle Henry's inheritance was shut down quickly and definitively. Patricia presented documentation showing that the inheritance had occurred months before Derek's marriage to Sarah, that he had no legal standing to claim any portion of it, and that his criminal behavior had permanently disqualified him from any future financial considerations. The most challenging part of the immediate aftermath was helping Sarah process the emotional trauma of discovering her husband's true nature. The foundation funded intensive therapy sessions with Dr. Piz Martinez, a specialist in domestic violence and psychological manipulation, who helped Sarah understand the sophisticated grooming tactics Derek had used throughout their relationship. Looking back, I can see the warning signs I missed, Sarah admitted during one of our conversations. Derek always steered conversations toward money and family finances. He asked subtle questions about our relatives, our family history, and always seemed particularly interested when Uncle Henry was mentioned. We hired a private investigator to research Derek's background more thoroughly, and what we discovered was absolutely chilling. Derek had a documented pattern of targeting women from families he suspected had hidden wealth. Sarah was his third attempted marriage to someone he believed would provide access to family money. The investigator found evidence that Derek had broken up with a previous girlfriend when he discovered her family was actually struggling financially despite appearances. Another relationship had ended abruptly when a woman's grandfather died, without leaving a substantial inheritance as Derek had anticipated. He wasn't just the opportunist, Dr. Martinez explained to us. Derek appears to be what we call a financial predator, someone who systematically targets potential victims based on perceived access to wealth. His entire relationship with Sarah was essentially a long-term con game. Sarah's recovery involved rebuilding her sense of trust and self-worth after discovering that her marriage had been based entirely on deception. The foundation covered all her therapy costs, legal fees, and living expenses, while she took time off work to heal from the trauma. One of the most therapeutic activities for Sarah was helping design programs for the Henry Morrison Foundation, which we established to help other women recognize and escape financially abusive relationships. Sarah insisted on including educational components about the warning signs she wished she'd been able to identify earlier. The restraining order proved necessary when Derek began making phone calls from jail, alternately pleading for forgiveness and making veiled threats about what he might do when released. The private investigator's research helped prosecutors add additional charges related to Derek's pattern of targeting vulnerable women. Derek eventually accepted a plea agreement that included 18 months in prison, mandatory anger management, and psychological counseling restitution for the destroyed property, and a permanent restraining order. His banking credentials were permanently revoked, effectively ending his career in financial services. Sarah gradually returned to her job at the insurance company, but with a newfound confidence and awareness that impressed everyone around her. She began speaking at foundation workshops, sharing her story to help other women identify the subtle manipulation tactics that financial predators use. The apartment Derek had destroyed was completely renovated, using foundation funds, then donated to a women's shelter as transitional housing for domestic violence survivors. Sarah found deep satisfaction in transforming the place where she'd experienced such trauma into a safe haven for other women escaping dangerous situations. Most importantly, the relationship between Sarah and me grew stronger through this shared experience. We developed much more open communication about difficult topics and learned to trust each other's judgment while still maintaining our protective instincts toward one another. 2 years have passed since that terrifying week, and the perspective that time provides has been invaluable for both Sarah and me. The healing process wasn't linear. There were days when Sarah felt strong and confident, followed by periods of anger, sadness, or confusion about the deception she'd endured. Through extensive therapy and our ongoing conversations, I came to understand that my decision to hide Uncle Henry's inheritance hadn't been purely about protecting Sarah from Derek's potential greed. It had also been about my own fears and insecurities around sudden wealth, having grown up with financial uncertainty and never imagining I'd be responsible for such a substantial fortune. Sarah has found love again with Marcus, a high school teacher she met at one of our foundation workshops where he was volunteering. This time, I insisted on complete transparency about our family's financial situation from the very beginning. Marcus's reaction was perfect. He was more concerned about Sarah's emotional well-being and past trauma than impressed by the inheritance. Their relationship has developed slowly and naturally, built on genuine compatibility, shared values, and mutual respect, rather than hidden agendas or financial considerations. Marcus often jokes that he's probably the only person who ever dated Sarah specifically because he knew she was wealthy, since it meant she could never doubt his motives. The Henry Morrison Foundation has become the central focus of both our lives, providing purpose and meaning to Uncle Henry's generous legacy. We've helped over 200 women recognize and escape financially abusive relationships, funded legal aid programs, and created educational resources about the warning signs of financial predators. Sarah often speaks at our workshops, sharing her story with courage and clarity that helps other women understand they're not alone in their experiences. Her testimony has been particularly powerful because she came from what appeared to be a stable, loving relationship, proving that financial predators can be extremely sophisticated in their manipulation tactics. I've learned to use Uncle Henry's gift in ways that honor his memory while protecting our family from future threats. The inheritance has provided security and opportunities, but more importantly, it's allowed us to create a network of support for other families facing similar dangers. Derek was released from prison after serving his full 18-month sentence, but the restraining order remains permanently in place. The private investigator provides occasional updates on his whereabouts. He's moved to another state and is working in retail, far from any industry that would give him access to people's financial information. Through this experience, Sarah developed an intuitive ability to read people's motivations that serves her well, both personally and professionally. She's become skilled at identifying the subtle signs of manipulation and controlling behavior that she missed with Derek. The relationship between Sarah and me has been transformed by this shared trauma and recovery. We've learned to communicate openly about difficult subjects, to trust each other's judgment, while still maintaining our protective instincts, and to use our resources responsibly to help others. Most importantly, we've discovered that genuine love, whether romantic, familial, or friendship, cannot be bought, sold, or manipulated. Derek's elaborate deception ultimately failed because real relationships are built on honesty, mutual respect, and authentic care for each other's well-being. Sarah's engagement to Marcus last month was a celebration of everything Derek's manipulation wasn't: transparent, joyful, and focused entirely on their love for each other, rather than any external considerations. The foundation paid for their wedding as a gift, but more importantly, it represented Sarah's complete healing and return to trusting her own judgment about love. Looking back, I realized that hiding Uncle Henry's inheritance wasn't just about protecting Sarah from Derek's greed. It was about preserving the opportunity for genuine love to reveal itself authentically without the distorting influence of money and financial pressure. The money that Derek coveted so desperately has become a tool for building the family connections he tried to destroy, for protecting other women from predators like himself, and for honoring Uncle Henry's values of generosity, hard work, and quiet strength. What happened to us could happen to anyone, regardless of their financial situation or background. Financial predators are skilled at identifying and exploiting vulnerabilities, and they often appear to be exactly the kind of partners that loving families would want for their daughters. If this story has resonated with your own experiences, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Have you ever had to make difficult choices to protect someone you love? Have you encountered people whose behavior changed dramatically after marriage or commitment? Please share your story with our community. Don't forget to like this video if it helped you think about relationships and family dynamics in a new way. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories about overcoming challenges and building stronger families. Share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the warning signs of financial predators. Thank you for listening to our story and for being part of a community that believes in protecting and supporting each other. Remember that your instincts about people are usually correct, and never be afraid to take action when someone threatens the people you love. Stay safe. Trust your judgment and know that genuine love will always reveal itself through actions, not words.